So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan, and this is another episode of Backroads Arizona. It also will be classified as mechanical because I am doing an oil change on my Onan Marquis Gold 5500 generator in my 2007 Weekend Warrior toy hauler. Now, 4 years ago, I did make another YouTube video about the same oil change that I'm about to do now. However, I realized my quality of my videos has gotten a lot better, so I decided to redo it. And let's get to it. So my generator is on the driver's side of the toy hauler in an access panel. Once lifting that up, all you have to do to access the generator to do the oil change is pull the top of the cover out and then lift up a little bit to remove that cover. There is a rail that the bottom of that cover slides into, and then there are two snap-in clips that hold it at the top. After you pull that cover off, on the air filter cover itself, there should be a decal that tells you what oil filter, air filter, and how many quarts of oil, along with the recommended oil viscosity for the temperature range that you're running your generator at, and the service interval recommendation. Now, the recommended hours between oil changes on this generator is 150. I never get to that in a year, so I do mine once a year before dune season starts. Now, obviously, that decal is going to contain the Onan part numbers for the air filter and oil filter. However, you can take those numbers to any auto parts store or go on Amazon, and they should cross without a problem. Now, something I did this time, and it's not absolutely necessary, it just makes the oil drain faster out of the engine, is you can fire it up and let it sit for a couple minutes to warm that oil up a little bit, and it will flow a lot faster out of the drain. Once again, this is not absolutely necessary, it's just something to speed up the process a little bit. And in case you weren't aware, there is a rocker switch to operate this generator. It's located just to the left of your air filter cover, and just like the one that should be inside your camper, RV, or toy hauler, you're going to press down on that rocker switch to prime it, then push up to actually crank and start the unit. This rocker switch will also flash 2-digit codes if you are having a problem with it that you can look up online and figure out what's going on. So right here, I'm just placing my oil pan underneath the generator. I like this oil pan because it does have a screw-on lid, so once you're done draining the oil, you just screw the lid back on and it's ready to take down to any auto parts store to dispose of that oil properly. The oil drain valve is right underneath the oil level check and oil fill cap. There is a drain hose that is attached to that valve that comes out the bottom of the generator. The drain valve is just basically a little T-handle that you need to twist counterclockwise in order to loosen it and start draining the oil. A pair of needle nose or a pair of pliers will help you break it loose, and then you can go ahead and finish spinning it the rest of the way by hand. As that oil starts to drain, make sure your drain pan is below that hose underneath. While that engine oil is draining, I usually take the time to check my air filter. In order to remove the air filter cover, all you need to do is unsnap 3 metal clips. Once popping loose those 3 metal clips, then you're just going to bring the bottom of the air filter cover out a little bit and down as you do that, and the air filter cover will come off and you will have access to the air filter. Then the air filter will just pull off of that housing and you take a good look at it. If it is dirty, you can replace it or blow it out with an air compressor to clean it. There was one little dirty spot on mine, but besides that it was perfectly clean, so I decided to reuse it. I did do a quick Amazon search and they do sell the air filter separate from the oil filter, but it's a lot more economical just to get the kit, which includes both of them. Before putting your air filter back in, whether you decide to reuse yours, clean it, or get a new one, you want to inspect the air filter housing. Now, the bottom section of this housing is going to be a little dirty because that is where the air is coming in at. The air is drawn in through the paper part of your air filter, and then it goes into the upper part of the housing, which should be spotless as far as no debris, no dirt, no dust whatsoever. If that upper section of your air filter housing is dusty or dirty in any way, shape, or form, you need to see whether your air filter is bad or whether the air filter was installed wrong, and make sure you rectify that, because dirt getting past that air filter is the quickest way to ruin an engine. When installing the air filter, all you have to do is line up the air filter with the air filter housing and it should sit there in place. When installing the air filter cover, there are 3 tabs on the top of the cover that are going to line up with 3 slots in the upper part of the air filter housing. In order to get the air filter cover on, you will have to go at a little bit of an angle to line up those tabs with the slots at the top, and then just straighten it out as you go down, and then snap the 3 metal clips over the bottom part of the air filter housing to lock it in place. You should hear a definite clicking sound when those clips go into place over that air filter cover. And if you do not hear that, then those possibly are bent or worn out and you need to get new ones. Once again, you do not want to risk having this air filter not being installed correctly or the cover being installed correctly, because then that air filter could bypass dirt and you could ruin your engine. So by the time I finished inspecting my air filter and put that back together, the engine oil had finished draining. So right here, I'm just tightening down the oil drain valve, spinning it clockwise and putting it hand tight. There's no need to use a pair of pliers or anything else to tighten this down. If you just go good and snug by hand, it should be plenty tight enough. Now it's time to remove the oil filter, which is accessible from the bottom of the generator. If you're lucky, you should be able to remove that by hand as well. However, I did have to use a pair of channel locks just to break it free. Once breaking it loose, I did finish removing it by hand. You will get some residual oil coming out of that filter, so be careful, especially if you have recently ran it, because that oil will be hot. As I said before, those are Onan part numbers, so I crossed that over to a Baldwin, which is a B7238 oil filter. I also take a permanent marker and put the date on the bottom of the oil filter, so I can always use that as a reference. I used to put the hours as well, but after 4 years and never even coming close to 150 hours in a season, I just quit putting that on there. Before installing the new oil filter, you do want to make sure that the O-ring is on the old oil filter, because if you double O-ring a filter, you will make a big mess, and hopefully you realize it before you lose all your oil. Now, this doesn't happen very often, but it can happen, so if your oil filter looks like this, you need to look in where you removed the oil filter from, because most likely it is stuck to the bottom of the oil filter housing. So if you choose to, you can pre-fill this oil filter with oil before installing it. I had done that previous years until I actually dropped that filter, made a big old mess with new oil. So I no longer pre-fill it, but I am going to go over something that I do because I don't pre-fill it during startup. And just like the drain valve, nothing is needed more than good and snug by hand for this oil filter. I removed the engine oil level dipstick / fill cap by turning it counterclockwise. So according to the service decal, it does take 2 quarts of oil with the oil filter. And being as though I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're always above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, I am using straight SAE 30 weight oil. I ended up going with the Valvoline SAE 30 non-detergent oil for this oil change. So being as though I did not pre-fill the oil filter before installing it, I ended up putting about 1 quart to 1.5 quarts of oil in it. I basically filled it up until it was almost spilling out of where you fill it from, telling me it had plenty of oil just to bump it over a little bit to prime that oil filter. Then reinstalled the engine oil fill cap. So I did not hit the prime on the switch, I just immediately started cranking because I didn't want the engine to start up and go to full RPM. I just wanted it to crank over a little bit to prime that oil filter, and I did this twice. If your generator usually bumps right over without the prime, then just get ready to shut it down as soon as it even thinks of starting, and you can do that a couple times just like I did with bumping it over. Once priming the oil filter, then I removed the engine oil fill cap and put the remainder of that 1 quart bottle in the engine for a final of 2 quarts of engine oil. Using a paper towel, I cleaned off the oil level dipstick and went ahead and installed it one more time just to check my level, even though that's not really necessary because the engine oil level was visible right at the bottom of the threads for that dipstick, telling me I was full. In all honesty, I usually just fill these small engines up until they are right at the base of the threads or almost dripping out of the engine to tell that they are full of oil. Once verifying that, I went ahead and put the dipstick back in, or oil fill cap, tightened it down, and fired the generator up one last time and let it run for a little bit to verify I had no leaks and that everything was running good. Once shutting it down, all that's left to do is go ahead and put that generator cover back on by sliding it into the bottom rail and then snapping it into place at the top. And that's about all there is to it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. There will be more videos to come about this generator, including a carburetor change and a code 14 that I got figured out as well. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.